Good afternoon. I think that we are going to start our session. This is session 5 on M&E systems to improve performance of policies and programs. My name is Francine Pickup, and I'm the Strategic Planning Advisor of the Regional Bureau for Asia and Pacific for UNDP, and it's my pleasure and my honor to be chair of this panel today. We have a number of questions that discussed these yesterday. We had a very interesting discussion yesterday. So I hope that some of the things that we discussed will come out of the discussion with you today. But the key question for us in the next hour and a half is, how do we ensure that the results from evaluations and from monitoring actually influence policy making? So it's really a question about the use of M&E systems. And so what we want to hear from the panel is, what have you done and what are the challenges that you face in ensuring that the M&E systems that you've developed actually get used to influence policy and programming? So we want to hear from the panelists today about what they think the successes and challenges have been to actually ensuring that the work that they do actually gets used. So in addition, we'd like to hear about how you communicate your findings, who you actually see as your stakeholders and your clients. And then with regard to the SDGs, this is the question that we're addressing for this NEC, is the SDGs, and what have you learned about monitoring and evaluation from the MDGs that you think is relevant to apply to the SDGs, and what do you see as the key challenges moving forward when tailoring your M&E systems to monitoring progress on the SDGs? And then finally, a broad question around the role of politics and the role of evidence in developing and amending policies and programs. How do you navigate political influence and create a space where objective evaluatory evidence plays a bigger role in shaping decision making? So these are some of the very tough questions that we hope to grapple with a little bit in this session. So with that, let me please turn to my panel, and perhaps I'll just ask you to introduce yourselves. That's the easiest thing to do.
Thank you. My name is Selma Serpa. I'm from the Brazilian Federal Court of Accounts.
I am Randa Hamza from the Ministry of International Cooperation in Egypt.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jacinta Bailey-Sobers from the Ministry of Planning and Development, Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean.
Hello, my name is Tamara Razmadze. I'm from Georgia, from the administration of the government.
Good afternoon. I am Kemelo Mophuting from Botswana, from the Ministry of State President. Thank you.
So why don't we start, we'll go in the order on the agenda. So Kemelo, if you wouldn't mind please starting with your presentation. I've asked the presenters to keep it to 10 minutes so that there is sufficient time for discussion at the end.
Calling in to say what is happening. And therefore, at this point in time as we are talking, the government is pressured and has committed or is committing to instituting a national monitoring and evaluation framework or system. To that effect, there have been several structures that the government has put in place to assist in that function. And some of them are the Government Implementing Coordinating Office, which basically looks at projects and services on the ground. And then there's the National Strategy Office, which just deals with strategic assisting government or facilitating government strategically to plan, to measure performance at ministry level and sectoral level. The NDP 10, like I was saying, attempted to create a hierarchy of goals, cascading them down to the levels of, from the vision through the plan itself and to the sectors. And to our dismay, the framework remained as high as a strategy document that could not be implemented. And as a result, the attempts to evaluate and to monitor have been very, very difficult. Within the structure, where government is also trying to put in bits and pieces of an M&E system, we've seen the vision pillars or the vision frameworks being cascaded down up to the levels of departmental goals, where ministries, when they plan, they have to borrow from what the vision is saying. We also have a working structure which is called thematic working group, and this is what the government, in an attempt to also have M&E coordinated, has instituted those 4 thematic working groups under economy and employment, governance, safety, social upliftment, and sustainable development. The basic role of the thematic working group is to assist the government to prioritize, to plan, and to budget as one. It also helps cross-pollination of ideas across sectors. It has not really worked the way, it has really not optimized the way it was envisioned, because we still realize there are some bits and pieces within the M&E framework that are missing, that needs to be joined together. And there has been attempts, or currently what is happening with the current government is there is what we call ministerial biannual performance review, where on every 6 months, every ministry has to report to His Excellency. And what happens is the ministry prepares a biannual report that is based on the ministry's mandate or strategy, and then there is a performance review team that has been constituted by the different departments that deals with issues around human resource management, finance, anti-corruption, and the core mandate, which are programs in particular. And it is through the flow of these reviews that eventually a brief or a summary is presented to His Excellency. And that is where accounting officers are rated for their performance, and they are given some rating. And where there are gaps, they are called to account. There is a follow-up and feedback to facilitate problems that have been identified during the briefings. And then, my 10 minutes, 3 minutes. And let me just rush over to what is happening, because all that has been happening from the past has been fragmented. In 2012-2013, government took a deliberate effort now to say all the pieces that are lying all over for M&E, they need to come together. And in 2013, we got into collaboration with the World Bank, which is currently assisting us to develop a comprehensive M&E system. And those are some of the building blocks that compose what we are trying to build at the moment. I must say, on the evaluation side, the reason why we came to this point is the practice of evaluation has not been really highly regarded in the country. Only traditionally funded sectors like Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education have had the benefit of having evaluations, and those evaluations really were individualized or compartmentalized evaluation. The government did not really fund those, they were donor funded. And the extent to which the results for those evaluations were dependent on the very same sectors that were being evaluated. So in terms of policy influence, I wouldn't say there is evidence that those evaluations were used. And the current system that we are developing, we have intentions to have a designate center of excellence for evaluations, where we will have all resources geared towards that center of excellence for evaluation. And within the framework, we also hope to have evaluation guidelines and standards that will guide how each and every person or institution in the country has to conduct evaluations. The current work that we are doing towards the development of the M&E system, we want to have standards on M&E, both the M side and the evaluation side. We also would be developing performance frameworks for the NDPs, and these should also cascade to the implementing agencies. And there is also an effort to institutionalize or to strengthen institutions that will be responsible for capacity building. Okay, 1 minute left. So what we've realized is the function of monitoring and evaluation has not been linked with the critical core structures of planning, of budgeting, and even human resource or performance, as you may. And the current work that is going on, we are trying to diagnose and come up with strategies on how we can create those linkages to enable monitoring and evaluation. We are still budgeting from 2 different budget lines. Our budget is not performance-based. Planning is devoid from M&E. There are no structures or formats that guides people who plan and those who are supposed to be evaluation. Capacities in terms of human resources is also lacking. Those are some of the challenges that as a country we are receiving. But in terms of the non-state actors, there has been a demand from them for government to account. Several projects that have been instituted, I can name a few: the power plant, there have been glass projects, a whole lot of other things. And then right now we are even having a water crisis. And the people are now saying we need the government to account. And this has come as a trigger for Botswana government to have a deliberate system that will allow them to have systematic reviews of all the programs and projects that are running in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kemelo. So I think that was a very useful and very honest presentation about how important it was in the Botswana case to have citizen pressure to really make the government reform and introduce an M&E system. But I also hear that you're still facing challenges in bringing what was a fragmented sort of situation into something that's more coherent and actually used for policy and programming. So yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Kemelo, for setting the tone for the rest of the panel. I'm from the Ministry of Planning and Development in Trinidad and Tobago, as I said, and I'm the Permanent Secretary. My presentation would follow the format: some facts about Trinidad and Tobago, the background to building a results-based management system, where are we now, where do we go from here? And just a bit for those of you who are not familiar with Trinidad and Tobago, we are in fact a very cosmopolitan nation, the most southerly island in the Caribbean. We're just about 11 kilometers from the northeast coast of Venezuela, just to give you a sense of where we are. And also we have this, the privilege of having, and I tried to show it here, but you won't see it, the only instrument that was created in the 21st century, the steel pan. And some of you may be familiar with it. So that's just a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago. We are also a middle-income country considered, and we have been building our RBM system for some time now. As far back as 1999, I had the privilege of being actually involved in setting up the first M&E unit in the Ministry of Social and Development in Trinidad and Tobago with some assistance from the Commonwealth Fund. So over the last 15 years, I would say we have been working to build our robust M&E system. Of course, the purpose of that system is to ensure that government interventions are being managed, that we are assessing the whole issue of value for money, the whole issue of good governance, and of course, our citizens are demanding more, as citizens are everywhere. Since 2005, the then government worked on the Vision 2020 development plan, and that guided all our actions in the ministries. It was understood that this strategy would be linked to an M&E system and a performance management system. But of course, at this time, we were still in this infancy stage of developing our system, of developing the structures and the mechanisms for the system. Of course, the RBM system at that time was linking the goals, the objectives, the strategies, the projects and programs, the targeted outcomes. But one of the challenges, of course, was the capacity for the various ministries to do this. So we weren't able to move ahead as we willed within that period, 2007 to 2010. However, we were able to do assessments of how we were progressing with our first 4-year report from 2005 to 2009. We had a report, and we have had a number of progress reports since then in our Vision 2020 plan. There we are, a number of reports over the 4-year period. But where are we now? Of course, we had a new administration ushered in 2010, and we all know what that means. We had a new development plan from 2010 to 2015, going on to 2020. And of course, during that period, we developed what we call a new system to manage for impact. This involved also collapsing a number of development plans which were created in the Ministry of Planning and Development, our Innovation for Lasting Prosperity document, our Working for Sustainable Development document, and of course, the plan that went from 2010 to 2020, all collapsed into our indicators for monitoring and measuring the Millennium Development Goals. So, what was the structures put in place? One of the major achievements of Trinidad and Tobago has been our ability to develop and get approved by Cabinet a national M&E policy, which outlines the system that we are looking at, the system that we expect to implement. Of course, the elements of this system, legislation, the national policy, as I said, which was approved just 2 months ago, the institutional framework for the M&E system, the building of capacity, which came up a lot in a number of sessions here, even this morning, the building of the capacity to do M&E, the data collection and management system, very key, and yet very weak at this point. The measurement system, and I'll speak a bit of what we're planning to do in the way forward with some of these areas, the reporting system. Just to say that in terms of these various elements of the system, apart from the national policy with respect to the institutional framework, we were able to set up the National Transformation Unit in the Ministry of Planning and Development, which is actually the center for M&E and overseeing M&E in the public sector in terms of human capacity. Over the years, we have trained a number of persons in the public sector through IBDET and other agencies, including the UNDP. We have set up some data collection and management systems in ministries, but again, we need some strengthening of those. And again, the measurement system still in its infancy stage. The reporting system, however, and you would see, because I did bring some of the reports to show you, we have been reporting, but again, how have these reports been used, not only by the policymakers, but also by the citizens on the ground? So I'm going to share a little bit about one of the measurement systems which we have established, and that is the National Performance Framework. This framework, of course, provides the ability for us to measure, to monitor, to report, and to use the results that we will get from the various ministries. Thank you. And of course, this framework involves 8 key results areas, 23 national outcomes, 52 national indicators. And one of the innovative approaches that we have taken, if I may say, is where we have used clusters of ministries in order to ensure that collaboration is taking place within the key result areas. Of course, this was introduced so that we would have more efficiency, because these agencies would be able to pool their resources, but more than that, they will also be able to have a focused approach to achieving the 8 key result areas. So just taking one of the result areas, crime and law and order, which is really critical for us in the Caribbean and in my country, we had the key result area, we had the outcome that we want to achieve, we have the outputs, and then if we could give a broader view here, we broke it down into the various indicators to treat with the issue of a safe and secure society. And then again here, using the results chain theory, we looked at the indicators, we also looked at the key result areas, and then again, the cluster ministries at the bottom that would link into each of the indicators and the key result areas. And of course, at the bottom, we see the chain, the results chain. Very quickly, a snapshot of the priorities in this particular area of safety and security, and I'm not going to go into the other areas. You will see the other key result areas there. Our targets: reduction in crime by 25% in 2014, a reduction in recidivism rate, a 25% increase in homicide detection rates, and so on. And then, of course, we produced our wonderful annual report, but again, very limited use for policy revision, very limited use by, the various stakeholders in order for us to deal with changes in policy and program and project implementation. Moving quickly to the challenges and weaknesses. Of course, the unavailability of current data at the national level. We are working with our international development partners to build the capacity and strengthen the capacity of the National Statistics Office, and I think this is across the Caribbean that we're having this issue. A lack of a robust data collecting strategy and system within the ministries, but I must say that government also took the decision to set up M&E units in every ministry in the country. However, of course, we have the issue of not enough skilled persons to actually place in these units. We have limited functioning of the clusters, of course, because in the operationalization of the clusters, we didn't identify exactly which would be the lead ministry, which ministry would actually bring together all the stakeholders and ensure that the cluster element is functioning. So we've got to work on that. I spoke to inadequate trained personnel already. We have insufficient evaluations of the key programs and projects. Of course, we talked again about the movement from agency-led evaluations to independent evaluations, and certainly we want to move towards that type of an approach, and timely submissions of ministry biannual reports to enable this report to be done. And so the Ministry of Planning has a lot of work to do usually to get the report out. In terms of the way forward, of course, the Ministry of Finance will continue to monitor the budget execution and the multilateral agencies' funded projects, but the Ministry of Planning will certainly review our national planning framework, because we've just had a new government, only 2 months old, and again, you know what that means. We have a new development plan to work with, but certainly it's an opportunity being provided, because it's all happening within the same year that we have the National Year of Evaluation, the new Sustainable Development Goals. So it's very strategic for us in Trinidad and Tobago as we review our national planning framework and we come up with a new development plan. Certainly we would want to involve stakeholders who were not included before in the planning process, the private sector, academia, and certainly civil society. We want to develop a comprehensive communication plan, because we recognize that a lot of what is being done is not known, not only by the citizenry, but also key stakeholders. We want to improve the performance of the ministries by establishing the M&Es, populating the M&E units. And of course, again, we would need that kind of assistance for the training of our people. We will be looking, as I go back, to establishing some type of training at our university level, because we do have a university, the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago. We want to continue to monitor ministry strategic plans, and of course, that is key to actually collapsing into the National Development Plan. We want to consult with the ministries to ensure that there's consensus on the KRAs, the indicators, and the targets. We want to enhance data collection within the ministries, because there are some indicators that actually the ministries will be collecting data. We want to use performance information contained in the annual report, and again, the communication strategy will deal with that. And of course, we want to implement the policy, and we see this as key in building the robust M&E system for Trinidad and Tobago, ensuring that the newly approved implementation, the newly approved national monitoring and evaluation policy is actually rolled out, and more than that, we evaluate how well it's being rolled out. So we are looking forward in the days to come to working with all our partners to ensure that we do build that robust M&E system, and more than that, that it just doesn't become a system there that's all elaborate, but it's, in fact, it's feeding into improved policy development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacinta, for that, and for outlining the robust M&E system that you already have in place in Trinidad and Tobago, but also for mentioning some of the challenges that you do face in terms of making sure that the findings from that system are actually used. In particular, I think it was interesting the cluster approach that you've used to try and get beyond sort of a siloed approach, but the challenges that you still face with that cluster approach. All the extensive, beautiful reports that you produce, but you said limited use of those reports. And then the issues of capacity that you face within the ministries, also important for how the evaluatory evidence is used. And then finally, I think very important that you mentioned about partnerships and communications, partnering with non-traditional kinds of partners, and thinking of new ways to communicate the findings of the evaluations. Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Tamara, who's going to speak from her chair.
Thank you, Francine. So my topic mainly addresses the issues that were raised this morning regarding the Sustainable Development Goals and its measurement. So, as you all know, in September, the world leaders came together for the betterment of the world to come up with a universal set of indicators, how we're going to improve lives across the globe. So Georgian people were part of this process, also committing to better future through, namely through pointing out the issue of livelihoods and job creation, as well as peace and security. So the process was largest consultative process ever, and it's good that finally the world has come with 169 targets and 17 goals. And it's good that we all agreed that it's better to include gender issues, for instance, in the development agenda rather than exclude it. But at the same time, this puts additional pressure towards implementing it for countries like Georgia, which is a middle-income country, low-middle-income country with limited capacities. And also, this also calls for better measurement systems, which is still not in place in a country like Georgia. So the government of Georgia, committing to this development agenda, was thinking about how to measure the progress of SDGs so that the resources are saved and it doesn't duplicate the efforts. And finally, the consultative process was started where all government institutions came together to analyze national priorities and policies derived from strategic papers of Georgia, agenda and policies. meaning that, yes, this is capable to contribute to sustainable development goals. But on the other hand, how shall we measure them? How shall we put a system which is efficient, that again does not duplicate our efforts? So in that sense, the government decided to come up with the national indicators that would measure each national policy, and then compare it with the global indicators, which will be adopted in spring 2016. And once these indicators are compared, the gap analysis will be conducted, outlining what indicators can be added, what indicators are duplicative indicators and can be just removed. And after this analysis, the module, the software, will integrate both the global and local indicators so that both national policies and global commitments are met. In general, that's how the Georgian government perceives it should work. But as in all my colleagues' previous presentations, we also face significant challenges, like I mentioned, the lack of holistic approach towards MNE, which is now underway to be developed. Also, the issue of big data and the need for the for strengthening the national statistics capacity, not only the capacity of the national office for statistics, but in-house systems within the ministry so that they can produce data which are relevant, which are reliable and timely. So these are the challenges we're facing. When I refer to big data, I should be admitting that there is no registers well developed in the country. And in that regard, we do need to put in place good, sound practices of producing big data that would then be used for measurement of our results. On the other hand, if we look at the capacity of the ministries, still their capacity should be developed in a way that there is the understanding of requesting the data which is relevant and which corresponds to the policies, national policy measurement, because the National Statistics Office, which as I said, needs further capacity development. They also face the challenge to produce the data because there are different kind of requests, sometimes unsystemic requests from the ministries to provide this or that data. And this issue is very much linked to the sound, well-functioning public administration. The public administration reform, which is underway in Georgia, will significantly reduce this kind of challenge, but won't eliminate it. So these two-way changes, the two-way challenges is what we are facing against the sound and relevant data. So once again, regarding monitoring and evaluation, there are so many things we can evaluate, we can monitor. There are different policies, like I mentioned. In Georgia's case, there is association agreement, which has set of objectives which should be met. There is national policy documents, which also set different agendas. There is sustainable development goals, which also call for action to implement them. In that regard, efficiency is key. Georgia is looking for obtaining the system, adopting the system which is consistent and efficient and avoids duplication. And in that regard, this is the key challenge for us now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamara. It's really interesting to hear about the challenges that you're facing right now in trying to look at how to apply the SDG goals and the SDG agenda to your national system that is in development, and how to avoid that duplication and ensure that you have one integrated system that integrates the national with the global, and avoid that parallel system which will just add to your work, especially in the light of the limited resources that governments, that organizations have. So thank you very much for that very timely presentation, and also for mentioning the whole area of big data and innovations that are now available to us to get data in a more timely way. So thank you for that. So I now move on to our fourth presentation, which is from Selma from Brazil.
So good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to present the work done by the Brazilian Federal Court of Accounts to evaluate the maturity of the evaluation systems of the Brazilian federal agencies. This work was done with the support of the Center for Public Administration and Government Advanced Studies of the University of Brasilia, CIEG, this unit that I pointed there. The objectives of this work were to evaluate Brazilian ministries' capacity to demand, to do, and use evaluation, and to characterize and describe their own evaluation system. It's a different perspective from the other presentations that we had. It is not easy to make all Brazilian managers understand what means an evaluation system. In general, they have their own way to measure the performance and the results of programs and policies to support their decision-making process and for other ends. But not all of these ways can be characterized as an evaluation system. On the other hand, the Ministry of Planning in Brazil handle a national evaluation system to monitor all middle-term budget programs that is mandatory, and annually the report is sent to the Congress to support the discussion about budget laws. And sometimes this system is the only system that they know as an evaluation system. I placed this photo, this beautiful photo here, is in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, is our ministry's mall, and these green buildings are the ministries of the Brazilian federal government. I placed this photo to show you that our work was focused on the Federal Executive Branch Department, those in that green buildings there, responsible for policy and programs that deliver public services and goods. When this work was done, there were 38 ministries, and only 28 of them were selected based on this criterion. We want to evaluate the system in similar departments, considering their hierarchy, structure, and organizational resource. Because of this difficult to make them understand that what we are working with, we developed an evaluation system conceptual framework that was presented in the last NEC conference in 2013 in São Paulo, and the NEC journal, the last one, published the paper that we discussed, all this framework. This diagram represents all the elements that we understand are necessary to characterize an evaluation system. So, to evaluate the evaluation systems, we break down this framework into foci, dimensions, and criteria of analysis. Basically, we have these 4 foci: evaluative demands, production of evaluative knowledge, organization capacity learning, and evaluation use. Regarding to the Focus 1, the evaluative demands, we ask questions about how well defined the governmental decision makers, how well defined are their program's objectives, targets, goal, budget, and our resources. How each, when, and for what purpose evaluative information is needed. How, I don't know what I did here. Who needs the evaluative information to be produced? We intended to investigate if the Brazilian government know exactly what they want to do, and if they have the resource to what they want to produce evaluative information to support during the implementation of programs and policies. On Focus 2, we are looking at the structures and resources that they have to produce evaluative information. If this means, if they have procedures and practice, evaluative procedure and practice, if they have skilled resources to evaluative rules and organization support. Related to the organization capacity learning, we are looking for the organizational environment to support evaluation, to support measured results and performance. And about the evaluation use, we are looking at the benefits that they get in using the evaluative information. To score the results of their perception, we built a scale to classify the maturity of the mechanisms and instruments to characterize the evaluation systems. This scale goes to not extractory to advanced level, according with the score the focus had. To characterize the evaluation systems, the scores of Focus 1 and Focus 2 must be at least 50 in a scale that ranges from 0 to 100. It was defined based on the questionnaire scales, where the center of the scale represents that the respondents have at least a minimum condition about the criterion we were asking for their opinion. Okay, oops. To collect the data, we send a web survey to more than 2,000 government decision makers at 28 minutes that I told before. And I show here the hierarchic structure of our ministries in Brazil. I'm not describe them because of the time. We had 750 respondents. We use the descriptive and statistical and content analysis as a preliminary analysis of data. And we use the multi-criteria decision analysis to evaluate the results that we have and to build the index to evaluate the evaluation systems. Here, there is the target group, the percentage per job position. As you can see, the largest group is the general coordinators, because they are the largest group of this target group. And, oops, sorry. See. Regarding to the, well, let me see again. Yeah. Regarding to the period of time at the current job position, This data shows that these managers were in the current position for less than 2 years when we did the survey. It is important to highlight because 6% of them have less than 2 years, as I said, and this turnover can make capacity learning more difficult. As for the results, I'm finishing. The analysis indicate that the major problem in the ministries is their low capacity to do evaluation. When we break down the foci, we can highlight that the ministries do not have organizational resource to support the evaluative activities. They don't have their own evaluation rules, process, budget, people, and adequate procedures to produce evaluative knowledge, to measure the results and the performance of their programs and policies. Besides that, the other issue that compromises ministries' capacity to demand evaluation is because the demand is exogenous, that is, comes from outside the ministries. Reinforcing this issue, when we asked the respondents to indicate their main evaluation practices, the most frequent answer was the annual finance report, which, by the way, is the most important accountability instrument that is demanded by the Federal Court of Accounts. This graphic shows that most of the ministries have not yet developed their evaluation systems. Only 30% have done so. In other words, only 9 ministries have enough capacity to demand and produce evaluative information, have enough capacity to measure the results and the performance of their program and policies. In this other graph, we compare the general results from the 4 foci. Yes, I'm finished. As you can see, ministry to support their demand. Now you can see it. The red line is the produce to measure their information. The point here is purpose, as you can see here. But they don't have enough information to attend their demand. Okay. And when we want to demonstrate that the purpose of the identified evaluation system that we could characterize their evaluation, we can see that the main purpose of this system, all of them, is accountability. I said about that they have. The main one is to produce, to elaborate the report that is mandatory and is sent to the Brazilian. These that evidence and have a specific purpose. They attain many purposes. Okay, so in the last we can see the results of the index that we develop. And their policies and programs, resources, infrastructure, and so on, as they have the same structure, the results of the index is very similar. There are no much difference between all of them. We have one in green that we classify it as an improved system, and some that were incipient, but the most of them are in the same level of maturity. Finish it. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you, Selma, for outlining for us this very comprehensive evaluation you did across the ministries of your evaluation system. I would now like to hand over to Randa.
Hello, everybody. I am Randa Hamza from the Ministry of International Cooperation in Egypt. I'm here today to talk about the monitoring and evaluation system of the Ministry of International Cooperation. However, with time, there were many challenges or factors contributing to enhancing the role of the center and enlarging the scope of monitoring and evaluation to institutionalize it within the Ministry of International Cooperation as a comprehensive system. There were internal factors within the center and the ministry. There were national factors in the government itself, public sector reforms, and there were international factors. I will start with the internal factors. The operation within the center itself encountered many challenges. One of them was the limited capacity for the center, because the number of projects reviewed was very limited, and that was why there were no non-representative sample of projects in a certain sector or in a certain theme that can provide that can assist in generalizing the findings into sectoral or thematic policy recommendations. Also, the late engagement of the center in doing the evaluations, in the ex-post evaluations, we found that most of the projects that were carried out lacked baseline studies and midterm evaluations, and that's why it was very difficult for the evaluation teams to derive contribution and attribution measures to the projects and their impacts. And it was very difficult to assess the impact of the project on development sectors. Also, the unsustainability of the institution, as it was a parallel institution, and we had limited communication channel policy makers within the government of Egypt was adopting a more result-based management to enhance operations. The sectors, I wouldn't say it's comprehensive system, and it realized the importance of monitoring and evaluation on the national level for all the ministries. The international factors, of course, because we're in the Ministry of International Cooperation, and we're mainly concerned with effective development cooperation measures according to the Paris Declaration, the Busan Agreement, and also the same principles that were adopted for Agenda for Action for Effective Development Cooperation. or the management for development results became a mandatory operation. So I'll move. Ministry, like the idea of establishing 2 units for strategic evaluation, which coordinate work within the ministry. They would start with the ODA policy level, where they develop the national ODA policy in line with the national development plan in Egypt. And then they derive the ODA strategic plan for the ministry and the ODA planning framework. Goes down to the different sectors within the ministry, types like budget support, technical assistance, and what are the main aims for ODA planning and implementation in the ministry. And it goes to the operational level, where the sector action plans are developed, and the donor-specific cooperation programs, donor-specific relations, and relations with other entities within the government of Egypt. The broken link or chain between the project and program evaluation and policy making was to be able to produce thematic or sectoral evaluations or analysis of the ODA contributions to developmental sectors and themes within the country. So that's why we established a division for policy, thematic, and sectoral evaluation to try to build on the different project and program evaluations that are done within certain sectors and themes, and provide build composite indices for the KPIs that are relevant to the sectors or themes to provide evidence for ODA policy. And the framework within the ministry, and it's something very close to the building blocks that Kemelo was mentioning earlier. It starts with the national ODA policy that defines sector priorities, and then moving to guiding strategy and plan, and then moving to a project screening and selection, because when projects come from donors to the Egyptian governments, there has to be criteria on which ones to choose and how to modify even the KPIs within the projects, the proposal of projects, to be in line with the national plan. After the project screening and selection, there would be a quality control, like they would specify the requirements for log frame, M&E plan, risk assessment, because most of the ODA projects that ex-ante evaluation, midterm evaluation, and ex-post evaluation. Accessible database for all the lessons learned, for all the data regarding the ODA, and within this structure within the ministry, the M&E unit, and within the national, as most of my colleagues, capacities of line ministries in terms of monitoring and evaluation is usually limited. We're trying to provide usually ODA projects are implemented on ODA funded projects.
Thank you, Randa. Abbas Korena from Sudan. Really, from all of this presentation, you speak about the system of or the problems that deal with the M&E system itself. But most of the problem that has obtained when you apply M&E system, most of them, they may relate it for the preparation of the plan itself. Because if you don't prepare your plan and put in your consideration the M&E, you cannot get a good system for M&E, and so this we need to put stress on it. And one of the main problems that we find it in most of the plan, that we need to build capacity in priority setting, scenario building, and change management. The one who prepare the plan, if he didn't have any ideas about these areas, I think he's not going to give us a plan that can be followed. The main challenge, I think, from what you said, that the main challenge, I think, as the top one, how to make plan-driven the budget, not budget-driven the plan. Now, in all of our countries, really we need to driven the budget. If we succeed in this point, as that, and that cannot the budget to be result-based budget. And finally, a question for all of you. Really, in most of our countries, and even that in Sudan, the informal sector is about 70%. The governmental, not more than 30%. But the informal sector is carried almost about 70%. How we can monitor this sector?
Okay.
And even that 70% is informal. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we will, I'll ask you all if you want to comment on those questions, but just if I can briefly sum up. One question was about how to use evaluations to really assess economic performance. One is a question about whether, I think Brazil and Mexico were mentioned. Are they examples of good practice? Then there was a question for Selma regarding audit and evaluation, the different functions. And then a question, the last question was about results and resources and how you ensure that the planning actually informs the resources, the budget. So shall I start with you, Kemelo?
I think the first question that was alluded to just was on the capacities to establish proper baselines and maybe targets as informed by economic analysis prior to setting M&E frameworks and its related tools. I would say yes, in my country, as I mentioned, we have identified gaps, especially around data development. And most of the time, because of that data gap, the comprehensiveness of analysis for any, even if it's not for baseline setting, but even for others is a problem. However, what I can say at this point in time is because of the efforts to put together this comprehensive national monitoring and evaluation, there are different models that are going to be capacitated, statistics being one of them. And when we, currently as we are speaking, they have developed even the national strategy on statistics. They have begun to work with implementing agencies who are the producers of data. There is administrative data lying in the ministry, and that the administrative data has for a long time not been harnessed. we are working hand in hand with Statistics Botswana in preparation for laying the foundation so that when other things are in place, we will not now be saying there are data gaps, there are data gaps. Yes, it takes resources, it takes resources, it takes resources. And with the national development plans that we've been doing traditionally, planning against or with, there has been a midterm review that has been undertaken every midway. And that midterm review has been used to inform analysis or setting of baselines. Now, the extent to which the review itself was comprehensive enough, given the data gaps that I've just been talking to, it's an issue. And we are hoping that with the development of this M&E system, which will look at the different building blocks that needs to be strengthened, we will have a better baselines and targets being set.
Well, in this regard, I should say that probably the answer to your question lies in the selection of right indicators. I mean, if we look at the macroeconomic data, so many things and so many different policies can influence those data. So the question here is how to correctly select the right indicator that can measure this or that policy. So in that sense, if the right set of indicators are chosen to measure each policy, then we can talk about the impact and we can talk about the influence. That's my point regarding this question. Pertaining inclusion of M&E in national planning, yes, I think it is crucial, and we all agree how important it is to integrate that in the planning and use the data of evaluation results that will drive us to a better efficiency and better results. In Georgia's case, for instance, I can say that some elements of monitoring are already institutionalized in a way that, for instance, in the policy development decree, we have made mandatory to do ex-ante analysis of all kind of policies, which is one step forwards towards institutionalizing monitoring and evaluation. We have also made mandatory to do regulatory impact analysis, which also can drive us to better efficiency. So some steps in the example of my country are already being made. There was also one question regarding budget-driven policies or policy. I mean, the issue that often budget guides us to policies rather than vice versa. Unfortunately, this is the case in Georgia as well. Although we have introduced performance-based budgeting, still there is no clear link between the state budget and national priorities and policies. And this is the culture that should be still developed in our country. So the first attempt was made when we have broken down all priorities into specific policies to see what is the agenda, national agenda of Georgia. From now on, what we're striving to do is to link those policies with the state budget. And there comes also the issue of political statements. A politician may come and make a speech and say that education is our priority, but you look at the state budget and you'll find that only 7% of total budget is invested in education. So this link is not there yet, but the vision is already there in my country, which is a positive sign. So the commitment to establish this clear linkage. For now, what we have, yes, we have performance-based budget, but it's kind of a little bit standalone thing, formality. So what we're trying to do is to link these two together. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quickly. speaking to the issue of economic development, I think over the past 10 years or so, the government has been focused on not only economic development, but socio-economic development and human development. So yes, focus on economic development and economic growth, but certainly forward, and that has been the major focus: people-centered development, human development, raising the level of the quality of living of our people. So I'm not saying it's not important, but the focus is not only on economic development. Yes. Also, in terms of why you didn't see the education there in Trinidad and Tobago's areas, key areas for focus, it's because we have been doing pretty well in that area in terms of universal preschool education, primary, secondary, free access to tertiary level education. So that's why it's not an area of priority. In terms of the focus on change, I agree that is, and that we have been looking at change management in all our planning frameworks and looking at innovative ways to treat with that issue along all the various levels of development. Also, speaking to the issue of results-based budgeting, over the last 10 years, we have been grappling with that, and we still haven't reached where we're supposed to, because it's also about mindsets and changing the way, and you know that that's not overnight. It takes time. Yes, and so we haven't really reached where we expected to, but we trust that with the M&E and the inclusion of M&E and the new government, that we will be able to find the opportunity to introduce results-based budgeting. Also, in terms of the informal sector, we have been addressing the informal sector because we have identified the informal sector as a key engine for growth as we move forward. And as such, we are at the stage of collecting data with respect to the informal sector and looking at how we could formalize it, but certainly how we could provide the supports, both economic, financial, human, to the sector so that it could really achieve its potential, optimal potential. So I think those are some of the ideas that I would like to share on some of the issues that were raised. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll respond first to the question from the gentleman from Kenya on the ODA system, like monitoring and evaluation only for official development assistant projects in Egypt. That's basically because I was talking about the system of the Ministry of International Cooperation. Another system, a national system, is being developed within the Ministry of Planning, and that's the overall national evaluation system, but it's still beginning. It's still laying the foundations with monitoring and evaluation units in different ministries. Probably in the Ministry of International Cooperation, we've been the institution that had the longer practice in monitoring and evaluation within a government entity. Also, I have some ideas about the budget-driven planning or the result-based or the planning before budgeting. Actually, I think that the process is in development, but it's very hard to make the shift swiftly, because I was discussing this matter with a representative of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Planning, and they were saying it takes time to move from one mindset to the other. So they are trying to like provide to cascade the SDGs and the national development objectives of the vision for 2030 that we have now in Egypt as a guiding policy, and they're trying to cascade it to the lower levels on the ministerial level and the implementing different implementing organizations. And in the meanwhile, they have to operate business as usual, like they they have the requests from line ministries and respond to them until they make the balance between both. Thank you.
Well, ladies first, about the evaluation and performance audit. I'm from the Brazilian Court of Accounts. Yes, we in Brazil, we understand that the evaluation can be done through the performance audit. Performance audit, it's an approach of evaluation. This discussion about if there is any difference between evaluation and performance audit, it's an old discussion, and I think Professor Rist has told us much about this. And we understand that as they have the same purpose to promote, to favor the improvement of the programs and policies. For us, for Brazilian Court of Accounts, it is possible, and do this. We do evaluation of programs and policy and other objects like the evaluation system through the performance audit. Did you understand me? Yeah, it's okay. But it is an issue that I mean, long time ago, 20 years ago, we have been discussing if evaluation and performance audit are the same or not, and many authors, Professor Hist, they understand that is the same because they have the same purpose. Okay. The question about the budget and performance-based planning. I mean, in Brazil, we have a very, very restricted budget because most of our public expenses is how to say, they are vinculated to some programs that must be implemented, and because of that, our budget limit the intentions of our planning. We have, I don't know if the Committee of Kenya visited us in Brazil last month, and I think they visited the Minister of Planning there, and they know more about our planning system. We have a multi-year plan, our pluriannual plan for 4 years, and every year we have a budget, a law that approves the annual budget. And this multi-year plan, it intends to promote the growth, economic and social growth. And the annual budget is limited by the capacity of the state to have the money to finance the programs and policies. As we are in a crisis, a financial crisis in Brazil, so they intended to have a performance-based planning, but we have budget-driven planning. The other one, I forgot. The other question was about. Yeah. Yes, we have some ministries in Brazil has a very good monitoring and evaluation system. We have good databases there, and they have very good systems, but not all of them. But not all of the ministries has good systems.
So I think that's it's time for a coffee break. So with that, I would like to thank all our panelists for your fascinating presentations. Thank you very much for all the effort that you put in. I think we've heard a lot about the strategies that these 5 countries have used to try and ensure that their M&E systems actually do inform, that their M&E systems and planning processes actually inform policies and budgets and programs. But you've also highlighted some of the challenges associated with that. So, and then I think that the issues around capacities within the ministries to do M&E have been key, and then also the issues around data and information that you've all mentioned are another issue. So with that, thank you very much for attending. I hope it was interesting for you.